All right, let's get right into it. We're standing at what you might call a trillion-dollar crossroads. You've got the biggest tech companies on the planet pouring unimaginable amounts of money into AI. But here's the burning question. Are they building the foundation for our future, or are they digging a financial hole so deep it could swallow the entire tech industry? It's a huge gamble, so let's break it down.
To really wrap your head around what's happening here, you've got to think big, like historically big. Check out this quote. This isn't just another tech trend, you guys. We are literally living through the single largest, fastest deployment of capital in the history of global business. That's not an exaggeration. The scale of this thing, it's just mind-boggling.
So how big are we talking? Just look at this number, over $650 billion. And that's not the total. That's the projected spending for big tech in just 1 year, 2026. To really put that in perspective, think about this. That's more money than it cost to build the Hoover Dam, the Panama Canal, the entire Apollo program that put a man on the moon, and the US Interstate Highway System combined and adjusted for inflation. It's just a staggering amount of cash.
So, yeah, we are smack in the middle of a historic capital flood. And what's really wild is that it started with their own cash reserves. But now the spending is so out of control that even these trillion-dollar companies are having to issue debt just to stay in the game.
Okay, so who exactly is throwing all this cash around? Well, it's not just one company making a big bet. Nope, this is a full-blown AI arms race. Let's take a look at the major players on the field.
And here they are. Just look at these numbers. They are absolutely staggering. You've got Amazon aiming for around $200 billion for their own custom chips and AWS data centers. Alphabet, or Google, is right there with them, pouring up to $180 billion into scaling up Gemini. And then there's Meta, basically hoarding every GPU they can get their hands on for Llama. And that's not even all of them. The short version? Everybody is all in.
But why? Why would anyone take such a massive risk? Well, it really boils down to three main drivers. First, you've got good old-fashioned FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. No CEO on the planet wants to be the one who missed the biggest technological shift since the internet itself. Second, it's a strategic power play. Capacity becomes a moat. If you can buy up all the chips, all the power, all the real estate, well, your competitors are literally starved of the resources they need to even compete. And third, there's this really interesting economic idea called the Jevons paradox. Basically, the more efficient and cheaper AI gets, the more we find new ways to use it. So demand doesn't go down, it explodes, which, you guessed it, requires even more infrastructure. It's a feedback loop. And all this spending and strategy, it leads us to the real trillion-dollar question. Can the AI apps and services being built actually justify this monumental investment? Because right now, there seems to be a pretty massive gap.
Yeah, this right here really shows you what I'm talking about. It's the great disconnect. On one side of the scale, you have that infrastructure spending, over $650 billion in 2026 alone. But on the other side, to make that investment make sense, they'll need to be pulling in something like $2 trillion in new AI revenue every single year by 2030. That's a colossal number. It's a huge target to hit.
Now, to be fair, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some serious bright spots. User adoption for some of these tools is just exploding. Google's Gemini, for instance, just blew past 750 million monthly active users. And if you look at Amazon's cloud business, a really good indicator for AI demand, its growth is actually speeding up. So people are definitely using this stuff. The demand is there for sure.
But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. We're in what some analysts are calling a Darwinian phase. A ton of these new AI applications are actually losing money every single time someone uses them because the cost of running the models is so high. They just haven't figured out a profitable business model yet. And that brings up a really scary question, right? Who is going to use all of this massively expensive infrastructure if the apps themselves can't survive long enough to pay for it?
And yet, the people actually writing the checks, they're still incredibly optimistic. Take Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon. He doesn't see this as a cost. He frames it as a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. He's betting the farm on it.
But then you flip the coin, and you get a completely different take. You've got experts like Andy Wu over at Harvard Business School who has this absolutely stark warning. He's looking at the raw inefficiency of it all and saying generative AI might just be the most wasteful use of a computer ever devised. Wow. So you have once-in-a-lifetime opportunity versus most wasteful use ever. Who's right here?
So with this incredible tension between the hype and the reality, It all leads to the big question. How does this all play out? With so much on the line, where do we go from here? Well, most analysts see three main ways this story could end. Okay, let's walk through them. First, there's what's called the Fiber Optic Scenario. Think of it as a dot-com crash 2.0. Second, a much more painful, slow burn called the margin crush. And third, the scenario they're all hoping for, the winner-takes-all oligopoly. So let's dig into that first one, the fiber optic scenario. This is a direct throwback to the dot-com bubble. See, back in the late 90s, telecom companies spent billions laying all this fiber optic cable across the country. They way overbuilt. A lot of them went bankrupt. It was a disaster for investors. But all that cheap, abandoned fiber is exactly what allowed companies like YouTube and Netflix to come along later and thrive. So in this future, yeah, big tech stocks might crash hard, but society, you and me, we get this incredible gift, massive amounts of super cheap AI power for anyone to use. Okay, scenario 2. This one is less of a sudden crash and more of a slow, painful squeeze. They call it the margin crush. The idea is that the cost of just building and running these AI data centers just keeps going up, and it gets so heavy that by, say, 2027, it could actually push giants like Microsoft and Meta into negative cash flow. And you know what happens then? Wall Street panics, and you see a massive sell-off. And then you have scenario 3. This is the one they're all gunning for. This is the grand prize. In this world, the massive trillion-dollar gamble actually works. The cost of entry becomes so astronomically high that it creates this unbeatable moat, locking out any new competition, possibly forever. What you're left with is just 3 or 4 hyperscalers that control the world's core intelligence layer, the central brain for the entire global economy. I mean, the stakes just couldn't be higher. But, there's another huge piece to this puzzle. It's a factor that all the money in the world can't just solve. We're not talking about silicon or software anymore. We're talking about real-world physical limits.
Yeah, it turns out the ultimate bottlenecks might not be GPUs at all. It's power and land and water for cooling. It's that simple. You can't build a new data center if there's nowhere to plug it in. And the demand for electricity is so insane that this AI boom is single-handedly bringing the nuclear power industry back from the dead. Think about that. So the real governor on all this growth isn't cash. It's basic physics. So that brings up the question again. Is this just the dot-com bubble all over again? Well, there's one really important difference. Back then, it was all funded by speculative debt from companies with no revenue. Today, this whole build-out is being paid for by companies with the strongest balance sheets in the history of the world. So if there's a correction, sure, it'll hurt their stock prices, a lot. But it's way less likely to trigger a whole systemic financial crisis like we saw back then.
And here's one more fascinating wild card, a purely technical risk. It's this idea of an efficiency pivot. What happens if smaller, more nimble open-source AI models get so good, so efficient, that they make these giant, energy-guzzling billion-dollar data centers obsolete? It's basically a race between brute force, just building bigger and bigger models, and elegance, creating smarter, more efficient ones. And if the smart models win, they could devalue trillions of dollars in hardware investment, seemingly overnight. Okay, so all of this brings us to one final, and I think really provocative question. Let's say this whole thing is a bubble. If it pops, who actually benefits? Who wins? Well, the answer might not be who you think. It's probably not the big investors. It's definitely not the tech giants who lose their shirts. No, the biggest winners could actually be founders, small startups, and everyday consumers, people like you and me. And why is that? Because think about it. If big tech spends $1 trillion overbuilding this infrastructure, and then the price of using it absolutely plummets, it completely democratizes AI. Suddenly, anyone with a brilliant idea, no matter how small their team is, could afford to build world-changing applications. So a devastating crash for the giants could actually trigger an unbelievable boom for everyone else. It could spark this whole new generation of innovation, literally built on the ruins of their trillion-dollar gamble. So I guess the only question left is, which one of those futures are we building right now?